Good afternoon. Tom Ginn here from Own Your Own Health. I'm really excited today to introduce our guest here in a moment, but we're going to be right back. Again, good afternoon. Tom Ginn, Own Your Own Health. This whole platform, Own Your Health, is designed to bring in people that have experienced different things in their life and health, their emotional health, trauma. Today, my guest is going to be talking about some of those things in what she's done to heal herself, and she recognized she had a gift and a talent to help other people. But this whole platform is about sharing alternative ways to own your own health. And our emotional health is important as our physical health. And so today I'm really excited to bring in an exciting woman that I just recently met. I've just got a glimpse of what she's done for herself and what she's doing. And without any further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest today, Brooke Kekos. I hope I said that correctly.
You did. Great job.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. And I just want to make sure before we get into that people are out there, that they're seeing this, that we tag and share this. We never know who we can touch with what you do to make a difference in somebody's life. So tag and share either on the live today or on the replay. That's so important. But Brooke, I'm really excited to have you here. Before we jump into your story and about what you do, uh, myself being a personal development coach, there's one discipline that I've applied in my life is gratitude. And it really changes everything, no matter what the circumstances are in life. If we learn that practice, apply it in our thinking, it makes life a whole lot easier. But I'm going to ask you this: what are you grateful for today?
I would say for those that are my biggest support system and that are in my life that love me unconditionally is what I'm most grateful for.
Great. And it's a powerful principle, gratitude. I'm grateful for you being here today because this moment is the most important moment of our lives. And what I come away with it and in our audience, it can change everything. So gratitude gives us a new perspective. And I always ask those that are out there, what are you grateful for today? So with that all said, welcome again, Brooke.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm grateful that you have me on the show here, that I'm able to, share my story with other people, that it may touch their hearts, right? I think that's really the biggest key, is being able to share our message. And even though sometimes it feels really scary and vulnerable, like it's part of that, job to use our story to help other people move forward in their own lives.
Wonderful. Why don't you just share a little bit about, where you're from and sort of that where you are today, sort of, a little bit of personal information about yourself and what you experience in life, and really move into your why and what you're doing.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So, I think that, where I'm at today is so much further than I was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I really hit rock bottom for myself. And it all really stemmed from this lifetime of being abused, honestly. And, I was raised by a narcissistically abusive father. So, a really, really toxic family dynamic. And then within that dynamic, I was also raised in a religious sect that is very more like a cult. I hate to say the word cult because everybody just makes it seem so scary, but it was abusive and controlling. So when I had those dynamics, that's all I really ever knew about life, and that led me to get into toxic and abusive relationships. And that abusive relationship of a marriage lasted for 17 years for me. So I went straight from home to being 18 and running away from home because I was so tired of being in the toxic family dynamic, that I actually ended up in another toxic dynamic. So I really was just getting trapped and stuck in those cycles, and I didn't realize it, right? I didn't have the awareness to see what I was living and surrounded by. So 17 years later, after I got into that marriage, I ended up in 2017 breaking free from the marriage because it was just, I realized one day I like had this kind of awakening moment when my ex-husband held a knife to my throat. And you would have thought that I would have had all these other moments. I felt like those throughout the years, but that moment I was like, I finally was like, I can't do this anymore. We had 2 sons, and I was just like, this is not okay. I can't show my kids this is what a relationship looks like. This is not what love looks like. This is, so I started to say, okay, I need to break away from this. And within that time frame, we kind of started to break away from the religious sect that we were in, because we started to see through the dynamic and how toxic, and that it was really all just a sham. So by leaving that, I lost all my family support. I lost all the friends I'd ever known for 35 years, because once you leave, you are shunned. You are considered someone that is an apostate, or someone that is, just like absolutely the devil, the evil person, right? And so I lost all of that as well as the relationship. So I was like, basically like, okay, I have no identity. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I believe. I don't know where to go from here. So really, I have my boys, my 2 sons, to thank for the fact that I was able to kind of like pick myself up and really start to say, okay, I can't keep doing what I'm doing right now. I can't keep just surviving this way. So I started to try to gather myself. I started doing some therapy. I started to try to work through and process some things. But I was really staying stuck because I didn't realize how severe my complex PTSD was. Like it was so bad. I was constantly having triggers. I was constantly disassociating from my body. I was constantly feeling fear. I was just living in fight or flight so much that it was exhausting to my body mentally and physically, really, truly. And then 2020, I got hit with another something else that knocked me down. And my ex-husband, the father of my 2 children, he ended up dying from drug addiction. So once we left the cult that we were in, he never recovered because he really lost himself. It's like he went totally the opposite side and lost control and didn't know how to get out of the depression and the loss of his identity, really. And he went to that side, right? And he ended up, it taking his life, unfortunately. So the grief, even though that was a toxic relationship, right? The grief from that and seeing my boys grieve was so painful. I was lost. I was truly lost. And that really was kind of like a spiritual awakening for me to be like, okay, there's got to be more to this life. It started to kind of open me up to seeing and believing that there's more. And that's kind of when I started to find other modalities, healing modalities that were more effective than just traditional talk therapy. And one of those was hypnotherapy, or rapid transformational therapy, which is what I do today, the RTT, is what it's shortened for. Because with working with the subconscious mind, I was starting to heal those patterns and those behaviors that were like keeping me really stuck and scared, in fear mode. So it just made me more consciously aware of when I had those moments when I was triggered, those emotional flashbacks.
I have a comment here, is that we hear about stories like yours all the time, and I can't comprehend that to the degree that I can never put myself in your shoes. I've had my own stories. I shared a little bit about PTSD. I won't get into my story, but a lot of times people don't know where to turn. But many times and that's why I love what we're doing here today is Own Your Own Health, is let people know that there's alternatives. Many times we turn to maybe somebody, a friend may not be the best place to go. We may go to a church or a pastor that may not be the best place to go, or we turn to a traditional psychotherapist or a medical doctor, and then they may have different modalities. that may not be in your best interest. And from my perspective, you know, you need to have ability to talk with people, but sometimes they put you on things that are not serving you health wise, prescriptions or whatever the case may be. So I think that's why you want to do this, is because there's people like yourself that have disciplines that you've applied. You went through this yourself. You said, wow, I can take this and share with how it worked with me, because there's so many different what I call adjunct or therapies out there that's outside the mainstream, and a
Mhm.
lot of what you're doing is now becoming mainstream in that. So that's the reason we put this program on, because you're not a unique story out there. There's a lot of stories like yours to one degree or another. So
Yeah.
hopefully today, you know, people will say, you know, maybe there's a different way to approach what's happening in my life or has happened and how it's affecting me further. So I just wanted to, you know, expand on that a little bit. So why don't you just share a little bit about, you know, you said you used to work, what is it, before you started the coaching and made this
Yeah.
business and career change? What did you do before?
So I actually was a medical esthetician. So I used to make people look beautiful on the outside, right? But it was funny because people would still already come to me and, tell me all their problems and talk to me like I was their therapist, right? And I was like, man, I'm already kind of doing this work where I'm already kind of doing this coaching space. And when I had the experience in 2020 when I felt like at rock bottom, even more so, that is what happened. I went to therapy and did all those things, but they wanted to put me on anxiety medication and depression medication. And so, what had happened to me? I got hooked on Xanax, I got hooked on benzos. I like literally was so addicted to them and relied on them, right? They were my crutch. Oh, I'm having a panic attack. Go take a Xanax, right? Oh, instead of just dealing with my emotions, dealing with what I was feeling with, I was suppressing them, right? And I find that so true with so many people that I work with, and it breaks my heart, right? They use addiction to anything, right? It doesn't just have to be to drugs and alcohol, it can be addiction to anything, right? To suppress your emotions and your body and your feelings. And what happens with that? Your mental health goes down, your physical health goes down. It causes autoimmune disorders, it causes cancer. Like people don't realize the tie to the fact that if you do not allow these things to come out, they manifest in the physical, right? They manifest somehow. If you don't process these things, if you don't move through these things, and so I quickly realized that I was relying on these beautiful anxiety drugs that I thought they were a magic potion. And what I was really doing was not handling my own stuff, right? I wasn't handling the baggage that I was carrying around with me everywhere. And so I cut them off cold turkey. And I was like, I'm never
Wow.
going to take another one of these again. Probably not advisable. A doctor would never say stop those things cold turkey, but I was just like, I'm not going to allow this to be my crutch anymore. And so one day I didn't take them, and I have never taken one till this day. It doesn't matter if I have an anxiety attack. I go from something else. I either go move my body or I go meditate, right? Meditation has become the biggest piece of comfort for me, and something that's healed a lot of my PTSD is being present, right?
Yeah.
So, that allows me to be present. Breath work allows me to be present. There's so many other things out there that can fix how you're feeling in those moments.
You know, you said something that I think it's really important, because the trauma, PTSD, all the emotional things is many times people compartmentalize what's going on, but in reality, what you're going through affects every aspect of your health. That's where, stress is the number one cause of chronic illness. So it triggers things that we don't want to deal with. So we need to manage our emotional health, whether or not we've had trauma or not, but we need to manage our emotional
Mhm.
health, because it does affect everything else that is happening on a physiology side or in the future. And I think you mentioned it. So I just want to expand on it. It's not just a a silo thing. I work on this and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because what has it done to your health in the long term?
Yeah.
And I'll let you go from there. Meditations. What
Yes.
Share with me some of the things that you've done to, besides the training, we'll get specific on that, but what are some of the things that you do when you recognize you're moving into that state that you don't want to
That I don't want
experience at the moment?
to go. Yeah. Yeah. So when I get emotional flashbacks, which guess what? I've done a lot of healing work, but they still happen sometimes. Because it's a subconscious pattern, right? It's something that has been imprinted in my mind since birth, having so much trauma that I've dealt with for so many years. I really see that I have to be consciously aware that it's a trigger. I have to say to myself, okay, it's okay. I'm safe. Like, this is okay. Like, really come back into that present moment. So I really have to, like, really process what's going on instead of trying to do the opposite, right? Which is, I want to like run and flee. I want to find the next thing that's going to keep me busy to not feel the feeling that I'm feeling. So I have to feel it. I either have to cry through it and say, okay, you know what? I'm having this flashback, and I take some deep breaths. I try to like emotionally regulate myself, because that's the biggest part, right? Our nervous system just immediately is in panic. And so I have to like take some breaths. I have to start to see like what's around me. People always told me, look at 5 things you can touch, see, feel, hear, so that you can really feel into that moment. But meditation. I mean, I found transcendental meditation almost 2 years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Say that again. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, Brooke.
It's Oh yeah, no worries. Transcendental meditation. It's a pretty big community, but it taught me how to stop the thoughts. So when someone has a lot of ruminating thoughts, anxiety, PTSD, you tend to be an overthinker, right? Tend to be an overanalyzer because your mind is always looking for the next bad thing to happen. So you're overanalyzing everything that's coming in, and you can't stop the thoughts. I have a lot of clients that always tell me, they're like, I can't stop overthinking. I can't stop the thoughts. I can't, it interrupts your sleep, right? Because you can't stop the thoughts. And so I think the biggest piece of healing from trauma, you got to stop your thoughts, right? You got to stop these going down these horrible rabbit holes of this thought process of negativity, because that's where your brain is always going to take you back to, right? Because its job is to keep you safe. So it's going to find all the negative things that we can possibly think about in one scenario. So if you can stop your thoughts, you're going to be the master of your thoughts, right? And so
Yeah.
that's really the teaching that I go by is, okay, I have to be able to slow down my brain. And this type of meditation is mantra based, right? So when you meditate for 20 minutes to 40 minutes a day, you repeat your mantra. And sometimes your thoughts will like kind of wander, and then you'll kind of come back and you remember, oh, I got to keep going with my mantra, right? And it just really breaks up that thought pattern so that I'm not continuing to just go, go, go. So it's like teaching my brain it's okay to slow down. Slow down. It's okay. Teaching my body it's okay to slow down. And it's really just it's moved me through a lot of that fight or flight piece. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, and because what I do as a personal development coach, understanding that we're operating at the subconscious and how it was formed. You grew up in only one environment that was not a healthy environment, so you thought that was norm, right? I
Yep.
mean, that's what everybody else is going through, right? And it led into the similar relationship, right? We just sort of keep that pattern going
Mhm.
because that's what our mind, whether we like it or not, our mind will dictate us to go in that direction. And because it's what do we call it? Um, it's familiar.
Yes, it's familiar.
It's
Yep.
familiar, so we do it, even though it's not good for us. It's familiar.
Yep.
And anything outside of familiar triggers the amygdala, triggers the fear, and all that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the besides meditation. What else do you help help your patients or clients with what you've learned and some of the disciplines, and
Yeah.
explain a little bit of what these disciplines are so people become aware of them. Because I
Yeah.
believe when people should do investigation, and once they know what it is, then they can make good decisions for themselves, right?
Completely.
So, yeah.
So I love what you're talking about, the subconscious mind, because that is really what I teach, right? And as a hypnotherapist, right, that's what we work with. We work with the subconscious mind. So we're understanding that, I tell people all the time, our subconscious mind is 95% more powerful than our conscious mind. So if you have, all of this old programming, these limited beliefs, all of these things running around in the background, you are never going to be able to create what you want to create in your daily life, because you're going to always fall back onto your default programs, right? And
Yeah.
so you have to understand what's going on in there. You have to make sense. You have to release. You have to move through these spaces so that you can create those new neural networks for your brain, right? And everything about neuroscience has taught us that, okay, our brain, it can change. Like, we can create change for ourselves. We can do post-traumatic growth, right? We can have this growth. It's so powerful. And I've seen it. I've done it myself. And I think for myself, I think working with the subconscious mind was one of the biggest healers for me, because I started to see the stories and the perceptions. I started to be the observer of my thoughts. Okay. So I was able to kind of see, oh, that's why I feel like this today in my adult life, because as a child, I didn't feel like I was good enough because my dad did X, Y, and Z, right? My dad always, compared me to other people, always said I could have done better, because my dad being the way that he was, everything else was more important than how I felt emotionally. So I never felt like I was important. So, we hold on to all these stories and these perceptions of our childhood, and we don't realize that we are operating from the same subconscious stuck pattern from our childhood, right? I
Right.
always tell people that we are stuck subconsciously in the time that we receive the least amount of love. So we're always
Say
in the
that
middle.
again. That was profound. I just want to hear that again.
Yeah. So we are stuck subconsciously at the age that we received the least amount of love. And so we will show up in our adult life time and time again like that. So when we're triggered by something someone does to us, or our partner, in our relationships is our biggest teacher, right? Because our relationships is what triggers us the most, because they're the closest to us. And if we feel any of those emotional flashbacks from the past that we're subconsciously stuck at, we're going to feel into those, and we're going to be like, oh my God, that's happening again. I don't feel like I'm enough, or I don't feel loved, or I don't feel this, whatever you're feeling in that moment. And it's going to come up time and time again, and I think a lot of people still need to realize that they subconsciously choose their partners, right? And that's what I did, right? And I saw through that. I subconsciously chose the partner that was most like my father,
Yeah.
because that's what I knew. That's what I knew what love felt like. That's what I thought love looked like. And once you realize that dynamic, you start to have that conscious awareness. Guess what? You're going to realize that you're probably not in the relationship you're meant to be in, right? Unless you grew up in a healthy family, unless you don't have trauma, which for most of us in this day and age is not the truth. A lot of us have trauma, whether it's big trauma, little trauma. We have some form of not feeling like we are enough.
You said something about trauma. We think of it as something violent and
Mm,
and um,
yeah.
abusive, and you put all sorts of tags on it. And I can only relate this for me. I grew up in a loving family, and how would I say it? But I was how my stepfather talked to me didn't affect my brother and sister the same way it did me.
Yeah.
And that was a trauma that affected me. And if I explained it to people that that's not a big deal. But as a young person, and you said something there that the concept I didn't feel loved, and that was the
Yeah.
the root of that's a new awakening for me. Thank you. That's
Oh,
what I love about these programs
I
is
love
that criticism or didn't affect my sisters and my brothers, but it affected me. because I took it I wasn't being loved. I just right now just expressing that as
Oh, I
a
love that.
new awareness. Thank you.
You are so
So
welcome.
anybody out there, it doesn't have to be that violent thing and they knife at the neck or a gun put at your head or a car wreck or anything like that. It could be the simplest word can create trauma, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely. It can be. And I love that you brought that up. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Gaber Mate, but his work is he talks about that, how each child that shows up in the family unit takes on like a role, okay? And either it's the sick child, the caretaker, the golden child, right? And they take on their own perceptions of how their family treats them. And not everyone comes out of it with the same type of trauma or the same feeling of the experience, which is crazy, right? And in my own dynamic, being with my father as the, kind of narcissistic abusive person, my brother took something different out of the experience as well, right? So we have a very different experience. I am the scapegoat child, and my brother's the golden child, and we kind of switched those roles throughout, whatever one my dad wanted to side with at the time, right? Whoever was his favorite at the time, right? And that always made me again feel like, man, I'm chasing this man's love and affection and I just never can get it. So we all have these experiences and we just take something different from them. And you're right, it doesn't have to be the blow to the head. It's just the way it makes you feel less about yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for pointing that out because was profound for me, and hopefully that message will touch somebody the same way it did me. So I'm getting a little bit of that therapeutic gift that you have there. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad that I could give you that gift today.
Yeah. So when did you recognize you hit rock bottom and you knew you had to do it? You started going traditional, and then you found that. How did you find out about alternative ways to deal with trauma and the things that you're doing? How did that all come about?
So, it's oddly enough, like I said, with the kind of the awakening process that I had, I felt like I was really divinely led through everything. I found like mentors and coaches that kind of just showed up in my life at the time that I needed them the most to help me understand what I was going through. And oddly enough, RTT showed up in my life, and it was so opposite of everything that I'd ever been taught to believe in the religious sect that I was in. Hypnotherapy was devil's work. Like, you would never do hypnotherapy. Yoga, meditation, all of that was considered devil's work, right? And so for me, I was like, oh, hypnotherapy, even like my subconscious was like not on board, like, ooh, that's scary. Like, don't even think about doing it. But I was like in such a space that I was like, you know what, I have to try something different. Like, I'm suffering. I can't keep doing this anymore. And so I tried it. And the first experience I had was so enlightening and moved me through some really massive, heavy stuff so quickly that I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I've needed for the past 5, 6 years of my life. If I would have known this, I would have had this now, I would be, so much further than I am. But I think everything happens for a reason. And I think everything happens when it's supposed to happen. So I think that is why, I found this and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to help people transform their lives. And, it's why I'm in this space. It's why I changed careers. It's why I found that, this is like really my passion and my purpose. And I love seeing people, heal and see why they've stayed in these relationships that really are hurting them, and they don't realize it, because they're chasing that love or that acceptance, and they're being the people pleaser, and they don't realize they're codependent, and waking up to all of those things is not fun. For myself, I was like, oh my god, I didn't realize I was that person. But once I did, I was like, oh, I get to show up differently. I get to be authentically myself. I get to cry the tears that need to be cried, to release the things I need to release, and I get to move on and really help people do the same. And that's a gift for me.
Yeah. You said something earlier on when you were talking about we are conditioned based on the environment and how that is formed. And in my coaching, and I'll just share my experience, most people can't clearly define what they really want in their life. But when they do, then everything starts changing because it's, Dr. Miles Monroe is probably one of the greatest influencer is understanding your vision, the power of your vision tied to what it is. No matter what's happening today, if you embed it at a deep emotional, spiritual level, get a clear picture of what it looks like, feels like, you make it reality in your mind, and then guess what? The divine intervention comes in. Things start aligning with the vision, the purpose, the why. And no matter what's happened in the past, when you get clear on that, would you agree that's where a lot of people they can't really define who they are? See, we don't need to fix things. We got the gift already. We just need to take some shackles off, right? But
Yes.
do you see that as where most people just can't figure out who they are, what their world, what they would vision their world to really look like? And how do you help people get to that place?
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I see a lot of people, they really, I mean, I was there, right? I was lost. I didn't know what I wanted. I had been conditioned for so long in a certain religion. I thought that, I was supposed to just live for that religion. And then eventually there was going to be some great, amazing space that I was going to get to go to eventually if I was, stayed in line and did what I was supposed to do. Right. So, but when we can't have that vision because we're conditioned by, who we think we have to be, how we have to show up. We're staying stuck in these 9 to 5 jobs that, we actually hate. The majority of people, they're stressed out of their mind. They can't have a real vision and really live their lives fully, right? And so I always teach people, a lot about Neville Goddard. I don't know if you're familiar with his
Yeah,
work.
sure do. Sure
Um,
do.
it is literally you are the creator. Okay. And a lot of people, they miss this. Okay. They miss this entirely. They miss the meaning entirely of the Bible. The Bible is about consciousness, and it's a history book. Okay. And it's about being able to say that, I'm the creator. I can manifest this and I can see it. I can believe it. I can feel into it emotionally, and then it will happen. It's the same thing. It's in line with Joe Dispenza's work. It's in line with, all of these people that are seeing this and trying to show others to awaken to their own power. So I wholeheartedly believe in that. I teach people that with working in hypnotherapy to excite the mind. I always tell people the mind is so excited by your imagination. Like if you can excite the mind, guess what? Your mind is like a GPS system. It's going to take you wherever you want to go. You just have to believe it. You have to believe it. You have to feel into it already, that it's already happened, right? Not the
Yeah.
negative lack, right? You got to get out of the lack mentality. You have to get into that I'm creating this now. It's happening for me now, and it's going to happen. Right? It's gonna happen. And I've seen that. I've manifested everything that I've ever wanted in my own life, in my own business. And I see it every day happen for me, right? Because I believe into it. I create it.
Yeah. And, when we get clear on that, when we talk vision, your purpose, your why, and you can manifest that through your own creativity, working within the laws. And there's many different laws. Of course, we got the physical laws, but we also have spiritual laws. And that's where people they're out of, when we're out of alignment, that's where we get frustrations. If the laws work perfectly under all circumstances, and there's an order, I won't get into that, but you're speaking my language. That's when I heard you. We talk. I said, I got to get this lady on because she's profound. She articulates it a whole lot better than I can, and so I want to commend you on that. So a little bit more about the RTT hypnotherapy. A lot of people say hypnotherapy. My first thought when I started talking to hypnotherapists is what I saw on TV of getting somebody to bark like a dog. I mean, I didn't think it was anything
Yeah.
deep and profound, but there's a lot of science and research around there
Mhm.
because I think that's important to validate. I think that's really important when people are looking for alternatives to find themselves, to heal themselves. It's got to be validated.
Yeah,
What?
I agree. Well, like we talked about a little bit, like where I was a little afraid to do hypnotherapy, right? Because a lot of people do. You see it as, oh, that's woo woo, or you see it as this, people using it as a stage thing, right? It's so different than stage hypnosis. It is like night and day. Think of it as, it is like really a mental health modality, really, truly. Because you're working at a deeper level than any traditional talk therapist can do. When you're just talking about your trauma, when you're just talking about everything that's ever happened to you, guess what? You're just reiterating and driving that subconscious pattern deeper. And so I always try to tell people, listen, you stop doing that. Okay, because you're just creating more, you're re-triggering yourself, you're going over the trauma again, you continue to talk about it and feel into the emotion of it. And emotion wins over logic every time. So you continue to do that, you're going to go down that route. So I think hypnotherapy, the process that I do, is it's really relaxing the nervous system. It's guiding you through a journey, is what I always tell people. It's guiding you through this journey of seeing the thoughts, perceptions, and stories that your subconscious mind hold on to. And once you see that, once you go through this journey and it takes you to these scenes, you visually go to the scene, people release things that they don't even remember that happened. They'll go to scenes they had no idea. I've helped a lot of people recover from sexual abuse because their mind has literally blocked it out, because
Mhm.
that's what the mind's job is to do, right? It's to keep you safe. So you're going to forget that experience because it was so traumatic, right? But in order to move through that trigger that happens for you on a day-to-day basis, you have to process it. And so people will go back to that and they'll process it. They'll move it out of their subconscious. They'll release that energy, right? And then they can start to heal from it, right? Then it actually begins to be like, oh, okay, I can let go of that part of me. I don't have to feel into that anymore. And so with that journey, I also, we start to talk about the inner child. Okay, we were talking about how you're stuck at that subconscious pattern where you receive the least amount of love. Okay, we're going to go back to that and we're going to heal that inner child in that space. Okay, so that way the subconscious mind and the conscious mind can kind of be on board together, because when they're in sync, okay, that's when you can begin to heal. That's when you can begin to move forward. And guess what? That's when you start to manifest your best life. Okay, a lot of people don't realize, you have all these people in this manifestation space and like, oh, I did this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, if you didn't do the healing work, you can say all the affirmations you want. Your brain has still got these other things that you haven't released or processed yet. So, and that's really where hypno work comes in, right? And you're being guided through that process to release all that stuff, to understand it.
Yeah. And so when I would ask this question, somebody's out there, and of course, I would encourage them to come talk to you. But there, a lot of people are going to be in their own community or whatever. If they're looking for somebody that works in these modalities you have, what should somebody be looking for? I think number one, really, do you vibrate? Do you have we have that internal communication? When I heard you and we talked on the phone, there was something there that we knew that we can continue a conversation in a meaningful way. What should somebody be looking for if they're looking for help? And I think that's important. And help could be a broad brush thing, but from your perspective, somebody that works in your modalities, what should they be looking for?
I think it would be someone that they really resonate with, someone they feel like, oh, I already can feel like this person is trustworthy. Because really the subconscious mind has to be on board. When we do this work, you have to be really trusting of me as your therapist, and you have to really resonate with me. So it has to be somebody that you're like, oh, you know what? I really feel into her story, and this makes me feel like I can, trust her, and I think I want to work with her. Right? You're gonna feel that compelling feeling to work with that person. And everybody I've ever worked with, I feel that. I'm like, oh, this person, I feel comfortable with them. Right? And I think that's the biggest piece. You got to have that conversation to see who you're comfortable with, because this is a deeper healing work, right? This is something that you are processing a lot of stuff, and stuff comes out, and sometimes it's you feel really vulnerable. So you have to have that really good dynamic where you feel safe.
Yeah, it is. That's so important.
Yeah.
No matter who you're working with, and on any intimate level, or even in other areas as well. That you got to have
Mhm.
that vibration or that feeling. it creates trust, right?
Completely.
Because the space that you deal in, you're dealing in very intimate spaces,
Yes.
very intimate spaces. So
Very intimate spaces. Yeah.
yeah. So how long you been practicing now? I'd like to, you started this journey, and what type of certifications, what type of training have you gone through? And I know you're on a journey continually training. I mean, that's the path that everybody I've ever talked to in this space. It's
Yeah.
always learning.
Always learning. I am always learning. I've learned a lot about trauma, being, trauma informed. The RTT practitioner, it's all incorporates like cognitive behavioral therapy, NLP, so neuro linguistic programming, and then as well as, some psychotherapy to help that whole process really be well rounded. And, I've only been practicing for a little over a year, but it's like, I've learned so much from each and every client that I have took on. It's like it really boils down to like some of these very basic negative core beliefs that everybody has within themselves. I see in each and every scenario, whether I'm dealing with really extreme trauma or people that just have really like more what I like to call like small traumas, right? Like where we're talking about where, you felt like you were treated differently as the sibling, or you felt like you were less loved, or, whatever that was, but it's showing up in their adult life. Right. And so I think, which is like they start to see that, and, people start to get more self esteem and they get more confident. And then they're like, okay, now I'm starting to feel better about myself. I don't feel like I want to do what I'm doing right now for work. Right. And then they're able to see and understand, okay, where is my passion? Like they start to really come into their purpose, right? And really become the creator of their own life, right? Of really seeing, okay, I don't want to do this horrible 9 to 5 job anymore. I want to do this, right? And they're starting to feel, oh, I'm starting to actually be who I want to be in this lifetime.
Wow. That's what I love about just every time you say something, I go, ding, I totally get it.
Yeah.
And so so we like, I always like to say this, when we have a gift and a talent, we want to share it with everybody and we want to help everybody. But in reality, we can't do that. Where do you really like to work? Where's your passion to really serve? Whether, so people out there listening know that, hey, I've got that. I'm in that realm, and you'd be the person I need to talk to. Where do you really like working to have the
So
greatest impact?
I would say my niche is really working with people that have been in toxic or abusive relationships. That's really my story. That's what I resonate with. So I really show people why they got stuck in this pattern, why they continue to get stuck in this pattern, right? A lot of people are in the dating world and they continue to pick the same type of partner. They don't realize they're subconsciously choosing the person they're familiar with. So really showing them why they're doing this, helping them break free from these patterns so that they can actually create someone that is their best partner. They can create the best version of themselves, right? To really heal and have that self-love again so that they can have a conscious relationship, right? I really want to teach people the consciousness in your relationships, right? Because I don't think enough people are seeing through to that. Like, how do we show up in relationships in a healthy way? It starts within.
Yeah. And as we're talking, we can probably talk about a lot of different types of traumas and whatever. But just a little, we said earlier, many times we think trauma is something very significant. It could be the word that was sent to you when you were a child and how it impacts you the rest of your life. And it affected, that word maybe affected me, but didn't affect somebody else. So it could be the littlest thing in trauma. In real life, it's a big thing. Your mind doesn't know that little thing is not the mountain trauma.
Yeah,
It treats
exactly.
it the same. So so what are some of the other things I always like to find out what are your passions besides what you're doing in your profession? What are some of the other things you love doing?
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, my boys are my biggest, they're my whole world. So I have 2 sons, there's one is 16 already and the other is 10. And then I have a stepson as well that's 13. So my boys are really my passion, right? I really love to spend time with them. We dirt bike, we go on vacations. I'm really big into the nature, right? Being outside, being outdoors. That's where I feel most at home. So, not in front of the computer screen or any of those other things. Like, I just love being able to do anything like that, experiences.
Well, early on when you stated that you mentioned your children didn't want to have them continue to see what this environment was about relationship.
Yeah.
And so your children became your purpose and a passion to change. And of course, that had to incorporate you because you had to change you to be able to make that happen. And you
Yeah.
said something there, and you mentioned early on in the talk today about meditation. You mentioned just now getting outside
Hmm.
and connecting with nature. Well, nature has therapeutic benefit
Oh,
if
yeah.
we just be still and know the universe gives us what we need
Mhm.
at a subconscious, emotional, spiritual thing. And my greatest place to go, I love being outside, but where I really resonate is around water. The
Me
bigger
too.
the body of the water, the more at home and peace I am. My mind goes quiet. I can settle in and I can get out of the chatter. I think that's where people are having trouble. They get so much chatter. Yeah, they
Mhm.
may have traumas, they may have all that other thing, but we are influenced by all the noise around us. And that's everything, the cars, the TV, the dogs barking. I mean, we got all these things that keep us out of ourself.
Yes, completely. Yeah, and then we don't. And I notice if I don't do that, if I don't find some type of presence in my day, right? If I'm just running from the one thing to the next, I'm going back into that fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
I have to take time to be present. I still am learning how to continue to do that because they call something a basically like kind of like a trauma drive where someone that's had severe trauma will just have like this crazy drive, right? Because of it causes a lot of patterns in the brain where it's almost like you have like ADHD, right? Where you can't concentrate, you get distracted really easily, and then you're just like, if I don't keep going, you're distracting yourself from like feeling and all of those things. So you just keep going. You just work yourself to death. And that has always been my MO. Like I do that still, right? So I have to teach myself, no, I gotta disconnect. I gotta take care of myself, right? I gotta slow down.
I totally relate with what you said because I'm ADHD, and before I just thought it was just the busy mind just flying, circling around, and all
Mhm.
that. But in reality, I'm also use it not to address what's going on the inside.
Yep, exactly. And I
I
think a
didn't
lot of people
feel,
get that. Yeah.
yeah. So you're saying some pretty deep things that I can relate to. So, and hopefully those that are out there will relate as well. So, I've really enjoyed what we've been talking about here. How now you're in Arizona, Chandler,
Mhm.
correct?
That's correct.
Do you just work with local people, or can you do your work on a remote basis, like we're doing right here?
Mhm.
How do you practice?
Yeah. So I usually actually work via Zoom. I actually have clients all over the world. I have a current client all the way in Spain. So I work anywhere and everywhere, which is pretty amazing. So I even take this on the road with me, like when I'm on vacation, and treat a client or do whatever I'm doing, which has been probably one of the biggest freedoms that I've been able to manifest. Like we talk about, like I wanted freedom and guess what? I got it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure everybody understands how to learn more about you. You got a Facebook page, which is up there.
Mhm.
You got your website, and we got scrolling across the bottom here your email. So anybody wants to reach out to you, they know how to do that through the email, your Facebook, and your website. So I've
Perfect.
really enjoyed our conversation today.
Same.
And own your own health is, how to deal with the traumas. And it isn't like we said earlier, it's not the knife at the neck or the physical trauma that we associate with it. PTSD is something could be very subtle.
Yes.
Very subtle. And we think it has to be a war act to have PTSD. It doesn't. And you've brought so much today. I just want to compliment you and encourage everybody out there to tag and share. But in our wrapping up here, what would be a closing idea that you'd want to leave somebody with? I always believe if you ask the right question, you'll seek an answer. What would be your advice around that?
You know, I love that you said that. I would say would be curious. You know, a lot of people think that they have it all figured out, but be really curious with yourself, a lot of self-reflection to see how you're showing up in your relationships, see how you're showing up in your life, because you will start to see that perhaps you have some patterns happening and you're not realizing that the same thing keeps happening for you or the same feeling or the same thought, right? Because if you start to be curious, you start to listen to your thoughts. You start to see what you're telling yourself every day. You're going to hear that inner critic and you're going to be like, oh my God, I have this subconscious pattern of telling myself, you know, I can never do X, Y, and Z. Guess what? That's why you're never doing X, Y, and Z. And then you're getting frustrated because you're like, why is this not happening for me? I keep trying, but I keep failing. Self-sabotage is, you know, one of the biggest things that we do as humans. So I think it's like, you know, just be curious and realizing that healing your mind can change your life.
Wonderful. And so I'm so grateful that we crossed paths. I think, don't think things happen by accident. You just have to be aware. And I appreciate you taking time today to be here. I would always extend this invitation out now that we have you back again and maybe dive a little bit different into some areas, maybe a little more specific or whatever, to own your own health. So thank you very much for being here.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm going to put you in the green room and just hold tight and we'll be right back as I wrap it up. This is how you get a hold of her. Her Facebook link is there and her website, and scrolling across the bottom is the email. Tag and share because there's so many people that have trauma. It could be small from our perspective, but it could be that Mount Everest in their life. Share this out. So own your own health. I'm so grateful that I've met Brooke. Everybody have a blessed day.